On October 9, 2018, Phantom of the Chopra tweeted, "Back when I was a kid, you didn't need Joe Rogan. Your best friend had a 27-year-old brother who was a fucking loser who would smoke pot in a room with blacklight posters and tell you that the Mayans invented cell phones." This is the Museum of Twitter, the show we talk about the most important tweets in the history of Twitter.com. I haven't listened to a lot of the Joe Rogan experience in my life because, frankly, I don't like consuming things and I know I won't enjoy, but from what I have consumed and the clips I've seen, this is a devastating and accurate takedown. And I think what I like about it so much is that it really lays bare how silly it is that a person who is like this is somehow really important in the world. Like, this is an accurate way of describing Joe Rogan, and it is also accurate to say that a major question in the last presidential race was whether or not every candidate should go on his podcast. Like, it would be absurd if there was a discourse about whether or not Kamala Harris needed to talk to your best friend's 27-year-old brother who's a fucking loser, but that's kind of the conversation that was going on. And while I didn't have this exact experience, I don't think I'd really had a friend whose older brother was a crazy conspiracy theorist who smoked pot in a room, but it definitely is a phenomenon I'm familiar with. Like, I knew kids who had older brothers who fit this description. They just were not the brothers of my best friends. And when this screenshot is posted, a lot of people will respond, fans of Joe Rogan's will say, like, yeah, well, why is he so rich? Why is he so successful if that's all he is? And that's not the most unfair question, but I would say that it actually says much more about where we are as a society that he is that successful doing that. I don't think that that means that it's not true. And the specific of the Mayans inventing cell phones is both accurate to the type of 27-year-old who says these sort of things, and is pretty accurate to the type of nonsense that Joe Rogan believes. And of course, the reason why it frustrates me so much is because this type of nonsense always leads to, like, malicious nonsense. I think people try to act like there is a delineation between silly conspiracy theorists and conspiracy theorists who believe harmful things, but my opinion is that a silly conspiracy theorist, such as it exists, is just a conspiracy theorist who hasn't been a conspiracy theorist for long enough to get into the serious bad things. Because Joe Rogan just got under fire because he had a long conversation with a noted anti-Semite on his show. And I don't think that saying conspiracies like the aliens made the pyramids or whatever is unrelated to eventually getting into conspiracy theories about anti-Semitism. It's just one of my big pet peeves is when people kind of like laugh along with like flat earth conspiracy theories, because if you actually go on any flat earth organization's page and you scroll enough or you click the right buttons, you'll eventually get to a sentence that reads like, and this was covered up because of Jewish people. Like, that's where it always goes. And I think when it's your friend's 27-year-old brother, it's fine, because you'll believe him for a little bit when you're 13, and then by the time you're 17, you're like, oh my god, that guy's a loser. I shouldn't believe anything he says. But when the societal indicators of wealth and fame are behind a guy who says things like this, a 13-year-old is much more likely to be like, well, this must be normal and smart things to say. Look how successful this guy is. Society is much more healthy when these type of conversations are happening in rooms with blacklight posters and are being said by people who are losers. Lots of people have quote tweeted this tweet throughout the years talking about how this is true to them. Usually it just says things like, this is so true, or this was my friend Eric's brother. But Remy had a great story. Remy says, my boy Edgar in 6th grade at Columbia Secondary told me his brother used to say McNuggets were made out of missing children, and we made so much noise in the class for 15 minutes that I had to leave the class. Like, that is exactly the type of older brother conspiracy theory you expect to hear. A phenomenon that a lot of people also shared, Matt being one of them, is that this is a thing that a lot of uncles do. I think particularly if it's an uncle who's like 13 or 14 years older than you. So they're not quite older than you enough where like they're a full authority figure, but they're not the same age as you, so they're not completely a peer. And this screenshot has been shared all across the internet, not just on Twitter. It was even on the Malcolm in the Middle subreddit 3 months ago with someone saying that this is Richie. And when it was posted on the Rare Insults subreddit, there was this conversation where Elm said, come on, they didn't have cell phones, don't be ridiculous. It was jet fighters. Parentheses, that's what I was told by a friend's older cousin in the 90s. And Dead Boy Parts responds, Jamie, pull up Mayan cell phones. And Ken Masters, in a reply to one of the times that this has been posted on Twitter as a screenshot, said something that I think we're all thinking. I pine for the days when he was just the annoying janitor on news radio. There are a lot of pieces of evidence that were on the dumbest timeline, but the fact that the annoying janitor on news radio became an important influencer and thought leader is definitely one of them. I think I want to briefly touch on and not get in the weeds too much about, just because it's hard for me to get reliable evidence, is that apparently the reason why this account, Staycam, was deleted is because the guy running it had a domestic violence arrest for assaulting his wife, and it was a whole messy, disgusting thing. And so I just want to throw that out there, make sure that people know that I'm aware of that. It's not essential to understanding this tweet, but I did want to mention it. It does make me feel a little icky about including it and agreeing with it so much, but I think that just because the guy who made it is a shitty guy, that doesn't mean that his point is not valid here. See, issues of separating the art from the artist even come up in something as silly as the Museum of Twitter. What fun. Follow me for a new tweet every day and consider subscribing at patreon.com/Museum of Twitter, where you get the weekly Museum of Not Twitter, a series where I talk about a thing that was big on the internet that did not start on Twitter. You also can vote on what I cover on Subscriber Sundays.